Hello everybody, I thought I'd jump on today because I'm working on some Christmas cards. Only 11 days till Christmas and we're working on cards today. And the materials that I'm using are only 3 colors. I'm using a cobalt blue mixed with yellow ochre, and I've mixed up already quite a bit of just straight cobalt, and then I've added just a tiny bit of yellow ochre to this well and just some more yellow ochre to make a nice green. So the blue is just cobalt and the yellow is yellow ochre, and really it's only 2 colors that we're using today. The other thing that we're using is a sponge, and I just cut a sponge to fit this tin. It's a damp sponge just to control the water on my brush. And we're using a spritzer bottle, and fill that baby up because we're going to be using a lot of it today. And the brushes that I'll be using are mostly Princeton. I've got 2 long rounds, a number 8 and a number 4. You'll need a large rigger and a small rigger. This is my Princeton Velvet Touch number 2, and this is a Princeton Elite number 4. Just grab a long round, a couple of long rounds, and a rigger will do just fine. Okay, so let's get started. You can buy watercolor cards to paint on at Michael's, and you can probably get these on Amazon as well. I will try to leave the link in the comments for you. And I have already taped down a card to my board, and a little trick is to put a little piece of tape at the top of your card, because once you have it taped down, it's hard to see where the opening of the card is, and you want to make sure that you have it oriented the right way before you start painting on it. It would be a shame to get to the end of the painting and find out that it's upside down on the card. So you want to just have a way to mark that. Alright, so let's get to painting. And I'm going to be working from top to bottom and putting in the sky and some distant Christmas trees. And then as I work toward the front or the foreground, I'm going to be putting in some closer trees. And the closer I get to the bottom of my painting, the greener the trees will get. So I'm working from blue to green, and I'm working from top to bottom. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my large long round, get it nice and wet, and go into my just my straight cobalt. And this is going to be a tea consistency, very, very thin, lots of water. I'm not going to be pre-wetting my paper, so this is a wet and dry. And starting at the top, we're doing a wash. Keep going into my water when I need to, because this paper is rather rough and absorbent. I'm going to go about 1/3 of the way down, and as I get to my last swipe, I'm going to just give it a little bit of a curve just to add interest to my finished painting. And I think I'm going to just put in an extra layer of pigment. I'm going to just add some more pigment to this. Alright. And the next thing we're going to do is take our spray bottle. I'm going to soften the bottom edge. I'm going to cover up the top so I don't spray into that too much. And I'm just going to hit this bottom edge. And you see what happens, it starts to run. And that's what we want. I'm going to keep my sponge handy and go. I'm going to pick up this excess moisture. You can even blot the bottom. But I'm going to pick up some of this moisture. I'm not going to pick up all of those runs because I actually like those in the painting. It adds interest, so I'm going to leave those there. But any big drips I'm just going to pick up with a dry brush. Alright, so that is the first step, and we're going to let that dry off, and then come back and put in some distant trees. I'm going to cheat a little bit, and I picked up a 3/4, and this is actually a 1/2 inch flat, and I'm going to pull out some clouds in the sky. So this is a damp brush. I've dipped it in water and dried it off a little, clear water, and I'm going to just go in and scrub out some clouds. Clean off my brush, dry it off just a little, come in, and let's scrub out some more clouds. Okay, a few wispy clouds. And I think one more time, a nice white cloud down near the horizon. And just so that this blends nicely, now's the time to take our spritzer bottle, and I'm going to hold it pretty far away and just evenly spritz to soften those edges. Sometimes I even turn my board upside down and let the water run the opposite way. Okay, I'm not going to let anything puddle up, so I'm picking up that excess moisture up near the tape. That will keep back runs from leaking out under the tape, and or keeping water from leaking out under the tape and causing a back run on my painting. Right, and now it's time to let that dry off, and then we'll come back and paint some distant trees. Okay, I'm using my small rigger, and we're going to go right back into the same cobalt, and up near the horizon line we're going to just put in the beginnings of a tree trunk. And for these evergreens, it's kind of a C-shaped, you know, you think about one side and then the other, gradually getting longer at the bottom. And then once we get to the bottom, the branches kind of run together, so that's what we can do as well. And then I'm going to protect the top of the tree and just hit the bottom. Soften that bottom edge. I'm going to take my damp large long round and just pick up that extra water. This is going to give a little bit of a misty look to the bottom of the tree. As long as the paper is dry next to that tree, we can go on to the next. But if you find that you have accidentally sprayed up too high, then let that paper dry off again before you continue. I think I can get away with putting in my next tree. You want to stagger the heights of the trees, and don't worry about them blending into each other. That's perfectly fine. Okay, just keep your horizon line in mind. I'm just going back in with a damp brush to hit the bottom of that one, because I still had plenty of water there from the last time, so I didn't need to use my spritzer bottle again. Okay, so we're just softening the edges on the bottoms of all these trees up in the distance. Let's come to the next one. Make this one a little smaller. And I think I am going to spray the bottom of that one a little bit. Okay. Okay, we're getting a nice foggy edge on the bottom here. Alright, and we just keep going across the bottom. We keep going across the horizon line with different heights of trees. And this is straight cobalt. We haven't mixed color yet. And I'm only putting in the top part of the trunk because as you get toward the bottom of the tree, it tends to get fuller and the trunks disappear. So once you get to the bottom of the tree, you really can just blend it all together. Keep your proportions. And that one looks pretty good already, so I'm not even going to go into it with any water. And we'll just do a few more. And maybe one more. Maybe we have one little lone tree kind of off to the side here. And give him a little spritz. Come in here with my dry brush and just pick up a little bit of that excess water. Again, we're going to make sure nothing gets under the tape. And it's time to dry that off. And then the next step will be to come in for some of the foreground trees. Okay, I've switched to a long round and we're going to put in our foreground trees. So I am switching also to my more greener mixture, which was the cobalt blue mixed with the yellow ochre. Still going to keep it pretty blue at the top because this is a gradual shift in color. And there will be 3 trees. So I think I will group 2 of them here and then one off to the side a little bit so they're not just, you know, like ducks in a row. So we're off center. I don't like to put anything right directly in the center, so we're going to come off center a little bit, come up. It's going to be taller than most of the other background trees, so put in part of the tree trunk, not all of it, because remember at the bottom it mixes together and you really can't see much of the trunk anymore. So the branches are a little thinner at the top, graduating to the greener mixture, and branches are getting fuller toward the bottom and a little wider. Okay, I'm going to come down a little bit further and the branches start to go down. We're going to change direction a little bit. See how these are pointed up a little bit? Now they're starting to fall. And right at the very bottom, I'll put in quite a bit of pigment and just those bottom branches. Go to my spritzer bottle, protect the top, and we're going to really soften that edge at the bottom. Alright, we'll go back to our large round, which is nice and dry, and just pick up that extra moisture at the bottom. Make sure nothing runs under your tape. Creating that nice foggy look. And I'm going to go up into the tree a little bit. And really fog out that bottom. Alright. Later on we can redefine some detail, but for now we're just going to get those trees in. Okay, again we're going to go back, put in a second tree. And I think we'll come this way. This one's going to be a little larger, and it will overlap, so don't be afraid to overlap. Okay, pick up some of that green, and we're going to come up, define the top of the tree, leave a little bit of that trunk exposed at the top, helps give it a little shape. C shapes help. The trees are running right into each other, and that is fine. Alright, we're going to leave that right there. I'm going to rinse out my brush nice and clean. Pick up a lot of water because we're going to splatter some water. And that will move some of the pigment and give us some texture in that tree. Alright. Now since I've splattered so much water this time, I'm going to let the painting completely dry off before I go in with that third tree. Okay, so our third tree is going to be off to the side a little bit, but I've decided to make this one our largest tree. So it's going to come way down here, just to balance out the picture. Okay, I'm using a greener mix, still with a lot of blue, but I'm a little bit greener. Okay, still with the C shapes on the branches. Picking up a little darker pigment as we get closer to the bottom. Not as much of the branch showing. The branches are starting to turn down now. And for that bottom part, I'm just gonna scrumble in some pigment. Now it's time to soften that bottom edge. and let that flow. Okay, we're picking up excess with our large long round and even going up into that tree a little bit. Clean off the brush often. Soften those edges off. Okay, now on this one, I'm feeling like I need to drop some color into the bottom. So I'm going to wet the bottom a little bit, and I need some warmer color. So we will go into the yellow ochre, and I'm just going to drop in a little bit. At the bottom here, and soften it off, let it run. With our spritzer bottle. Keep that edge nice and dry. Okay. I'm just define some more of that fog. And we'll let that dry off and come back for a few final details. Okay, we're almost finished. We need a few shadows under the trees. So I'm going to take my large long round and just pre-wet some shadow shapes coming from each of these trees. And I'm going to go back in, and with a lot of our very blue mixed with a little bit of this medium green, and I'm going to add I'm going to cheat a little bit and put in just a pinch of purple, because that's a nice shadow color. And I'm just going to drop in a little bit of shadow. Okay, and then I'm going to tilt my board so that the shadow will run diagonally and just hit the bottom of that shadow. And let it run, let it fade out. Pick up excess that's running toward the tape, using the sponge to wipe off in between. Okay. To go in and just lift in places to keep that fog effect going. Okay. All right. I'm going to go in with the small rigger and go back into our pure cobalt, very light diluted wash, and come up very diluted, and throw in some sticks. These will be like bare trees in the background. very light, just in groupings. Just to add some interest to the background. Add some more water, just let some shadow fall on the edges. Soften that line a little bit. And on this one, I'm just going to let it come all the way down. Very soft. And let's redefine, since we have all of these soft edges going on, we need something to draw the eye. So I'm going to use a small rigger again, and just be careful you don't put your hand in the wet part like I just did, and just redefine the tops. Don't get carried away, just the tops of the trees. A few directional marks. Don't come down too far or you'll lose the effect. And go into the trunk with your branches a little bit so that it doesn't look like just a line going down the middle of your tree. See, so you redefine the tops just a little bit. And it even enhances that foggy idea. Just putting some texture marks at the bottoms of these trees, very, very lightly. But just something to center your eye. Okay. Some of these sticks that I just put in at the top need a little something, just a few little marks here and there to indicate shrubbery or tree foliage. Just a few. I'm going to go back in and blot so that they're not too bright, because they are still background. All right. I think we will call that one finished before I start to fuss too much. Okay, we're going to let this dry off. We're going to spatter in some snow, and we will be finished with this one. Okay, so now we're going to spatter in some snow, and I'm using Zinc White by M. Graham. And I really like the texture of this and the opacity of it. So I just take a little dish, and you only need a dab of this. And I have found, you can experiment with this, but for me, I have found that a long rigger works really well for spattering, kind of a small spatter like snow that we're going to do here. So I'm going to take my long rigger, and I'm going to work this gouache. This is called gouache. And I'm going to just get it so that it is very, very thin. I would say this is going to be in between a tea and this is going to be a milk consistency. And what I like to do before I spatter on my painting is I like to take a scrap piece of paper and spatter on that to make sure that I've got the consistency of my paint right for the type of spatter that I'm looking for, because every painting's different. So with this one, I'll just hold the brush at the very end and tap it, and that gives me the look of snow that I like. Sometimes I will tap it against my finger, and that gives you a little of a different size of spatter. So I think we're about where we want to be. Alright, so I'll load my brush up again with this gouache, and I'm going to spatter some snow on my picture. And I found also with spatter, and you have to experiment with this because you'll come up with your own style for this, but I like to kind of stay in the same area instead of trying to make it all even. If you kind of stay in the same area, it'll pull your eye in better. Okay, so these drops are kind of large, which is great. I like the way it looks, but now I want some smaller drops. So I'll go to tapping against my finger. I want to get a little more up in the sky area. So I'm starting to come around the edges. And you have to watch it because this starts to get really fun, and you could just go on and on with it, but just don't overdo it. And it's time to take the tape off. And since most of my painting is dry except for the spatter I just put down, I'm going to go ahead and take the tape off, but normally I would wait until the painting is completely dry. But I want you to be able to see it with the tape off, so I will very carefully. When I pull tape, I pull it away from the painting, not toward it. And very slowly so that you don't tear the card, because this tape, no matter what kind of tape you're using, will sometimes just stick to parts of the paper, and you get these little pulls. If you see that happening, just go to the other side. Don't keep going. There are ways to repair that a little bit if it happens, but the key is go slow and look at what's happening on your paper. See, I got a little bit. So here's our finished Christmas card, and the only thing we have left to do is to sign it. These cards are nice keepsakes, and you know, somebody might want to keep it and pop it in a little frame, so make sure you put your signature on it. There we go. All ready to mail. So thank you for joining me today. I hope that you've enjoyed the video and that you'll try some of these cards and send them out to some of your friends and loved ones. Till next time, grace and peace, and Merry Christmas.